Calvary, I'm here with one of our amazing elders, Karen Moreno, and earlier this year the Lord impressed on her heart to give her car away to a mother in need. So I want you to hear this amazing story about restoration and obedience. Karen, thanks so much for joining me today. I want you to share with everybody why you have such a heart for mothers in need.
Yes, well, thank you, Pastor Kim, for having me here, and it truly is an honor to be able to, do this, because this was something that the Lord called me to do.
Right.
I was 19 years old. I was a single mom. I was finishing my freshman year in college, and I just know the struggle. I was not financially fit in any area of my life. I had car troubles. I remember I left. I had my car needed some repairs, and I left it with the mechanic for 2 months because I couldn't afford to get it out.
Right.
And I'm here riding with a baby, 6-month-old, no AC, in the middle of July. So I just know the struggle, and I was just so blessed to have so many people just help me, in any way they could. My parents were such a support system, and just different organizations that helped out with single moms and, the issues that I was going through at that time. So I remembered, just crying because I couldn't believe all the blessings that I was receiving.
Wow.
And I said, Lord, one day I'm going to do this for somebody. And,
Wow.
Here we are, and I'm grateful. I'm so just truly honored to be able to have this opportunity to bless somebody else.
Tell me why or what did God impress upon your heart this past February? Because that's what we're here for. That's why we're here.
Okay, so I approached you guys,
Right.
and it was right after Pastor Ben had been preaching, and he said something that it really just spoke to my heart. And he said, the Lord has been asking you to do something, and you haven't done it. And if you're looking for a sign, this is it. And so at that moment, I knew, okay, this was for me. And right as soon as our gathering was over, I approached you and Pastor Ben, and I said, I'm going to give my car away.
Right. And I remember that, and remember just thinking, this is amazing, because you have a revelation that God has given you so much, and now in turn you can give so much to someone else, to another mom in need, because you understand what that's like. And I'm so excited about that, because that's what we're here for today. We have had over 50 submissions come into Calvary. In church, I'm so excited to be able to tell you the winner of our car giveaway for Mother's Day. Get a load of this. I would like to nominate Azalee Campos, a 19-year-old single mother of 3. She became a mother at the early age of 15, and because of the teen pregnancy, she never finished high school. She's dedicated her life to her children and has worked jobs to provide for them, all while not having a car. She wants to finish her GED but can't make it to all of the classes due to her lack of transportation. In December of 2018, her 5-month-old baby unexpectedly passed away due to SIDS, and Calvary Church walked her through the season of grief and always pointed her back to Jesus. She faithfully attends every Sunday and midweek experience. She's graduated from Growth Track, she's gotten baptized, and now she serves on the Dream Team. Thank you for declaring the gospel to our family, and thank you for your heart for mothers in need. Calvary Church, put your hands together and help me honor and celebrate this incredible mother, Azalee.
Oh, come on, church. You can do better than that. That's the church being the church. Wow. Wow. Well, I love it because, did you see a picture of the car? Wow, look at this. Look at this. Do you see it? Is that awesome? You know what I love about this? I want to thank you for being the church.
That's right.
You and your husband are a gift to this house. And I want to thank you and many others who live our mission, not just the declaration, but the demonstration of the goodness of God. And as a church, this is what we get to do. This is how we get to live. So on this Mother's Day, we're celebrating and we're blessing and we're just blessed to be the church. And one more time, let's give God a good hand clap of praise. Wow. Wow.
Jump right in. I want you to take your Bibles out, take your note sheet out, or just put your attention over on the big screens as these scriptures come up. 2 Corinthians 10:12 says, "For we would never dare to compare ourselves with people who base their worth on self-commendation. They check themselves against and compare themselves with one another. It is not wise. It just shows that they don't have any sense. What self-delusion." When Ben and I started out in ministry, I was so excited. You know, we were just babies, really. We were teenagers. And with that age comes that season of optimism. And I had visions of being my husband's greatest cheerleader and supporting him and cheering him on from the sidelines. And never did it occur to me that my position on this ministry team would include, as a pastor's wife, some extra demands on me, some expectations and expectations of its own, actually. I quickly realized, however, that the list was absolutely alive and well. I hadn't grown up in church, let alone in ministry, so I had walked into this ministry world pretty naive and really unprepared. Ministry was outside of my wheelhouse, but I had married into this foreign lifestyle, a lifestyle that brought with it speaking expectations, teaching demands, leadership responsibilities, and this lifestyle demanded me to be a people person, which I was not. I am an introvert by nature. I am not an extrovert, and so this was just foreign to me. And the enemy worked his way into my mind and utilized this new ministry role to point out all the things that I wasn't. And I wasn't the only one. Ben, who by his very nature is completely the opposite personality from me, found himself struggling in similar ways as well. And as years passed, we both found ourselves struggling to avoid the trap of comparison. The trap of comparison. You know, comparison takes us all down this crazy road, but the end result is always the same. It leads us to feeling inadequate, deficient, and inferior. It led me into the dark grips of suicidal depression, which I've shared my story in the past. It led Ben into just resigning out of ministry altogether. In different seasons, we both came to the end of ourselves, but God was so gracious, and he rescued us at different times in our lives, and he freed us from the deceptive trap of comparison. And I know that we are not the only ones who've fallen victim to this trap, nor do I believe that we are the only ones who are tempted to fall into it again and again and again. The Apostle Paul wrote in his second letter to Corinthians, our theme verse, he said, "Comparing yourselves among yourselves is just not wise." The word comparing in that passage, it paints this picture of two people standing next to each other and judging themselves based off of the other person.
What does comparison do? It basically elevates one person, puffs one person up, and devalues or puts the other person down. That's what comparison does. By its very nature, it fails to recognize the manifold, diverse graces of God that exist in the body of Christ. One of the most incredible things that I believe that Jesus' death and resurrection accomplished for you and for me was the ability to simply be who God created you to be, uniquely and beautifully. To simply be who God created you to be. How many of you, somewhere along the road of life, have found yourself struggling to be like someone else? You feel like you don't measure up, you don't have the gifts or the talents that they do. You aren't as far along as they are. Your kids aren't as well behaved. Your house isn't as nice. I could go on and on and on. I'll be really honest with you. I cannot capture a room's attention in worship like Brie Botello. I don't have the ability to capture an auditorium full of people in 0.02 seconds like Kareem Hickman. And I surely don't have the ability to make you want to turn to your neighbor, smack them in the face, and run 7 laps around the building like Ben. If I were to attempt to do that, it would be a painful struggle for me. You wouldn't want to see it, and I wouldn't want to try it, right? But you know what I can do? You know what I am? I'm an artist. I can create. I can turn a house into a home. I can see a blank canvas and imagine without one stroke even being put on that canvas, a beautiful masterpiece. That's what I can do. That's what God created me to do. Listen to 1 Corinthians 12:14 through 18. I want you to think about how all these things make you more significant, not less. Catch that. All these things make you more significant, not less. A body isn't just a single part blown up into something huge. It's all the different but similar parts arranged and functioning together. If the foot said, I'm not elegant like the hand, embellished with rings, I guess I don't belong to this body, would that make it so? Or if the ear said, I'm not beautiful like the eye, limpid and expressive, I don't deserve a place on the head, would you want to remove it from the body? If the body was all an eye, how could it hear? If it was all an ear, how could it smell? As it is, we see that God has carefully placed each part of the body right where he wanted it. Right where he wanted it. Why can we not see that all of these things are actually strengths, not weaknesses? It's time to start walking into this place called empowering grace. Grace to be who God intentionally designed you to be. Stop making excuses for the things that you're not, the things you can't do, and start celebrating who God purposefully, intentionally, strategically created you to be, with no apologies. 2 Peter 1:2 through 3 says, may your eyes be open to the full measure of grace. That's God's favor. And the peace given you. Freedom from fears and distracting desires. That's comparison. As you grow in the knowledge of God and of Jesus our Lord, we've been given so much more than we realize or recognize. We've been given the full measure. That means you don't lack anything. You don't lack anything. That means you don't lack anything. Your personality isn't lacking something because it's not like someone else's. You have been given the full measure of grace. You know, Satan is a thief and a liar. He comes to steal, to kill, to destroy. And one of the ways that he comes is through religion. Why? Why does he come through that? Why? Because religion tells us that we have to do and do and do and do in order to measure up, to be acceptable, right? That we have to do more in order to attain some standard worthy of God's acceptance and love. That's a lie. That's a lie. I struggled for years with the gifts and the talents that I had. I felt like they served no purpose at all in ministry. I'd compare myself with everyone else, and I came to the conclusion that I was just simply an epic failure. Actually, what I was saying, even though I may not actually speak it out loud, but when I felt like what I was gifted to do was of no purpose, and I wanted what someone else was like or had, What I was really saying was, I guess God missed it. We don't ever think that that's what that means, but that's exactly what it means. And I believe that many of you are in the exact same place today. You're struggling because you wish you were like someone else. You wish you were doing what someone else was doing. You wish you had what someone else had. You compare yourself. You're looking to elevate someone, and it's usually the other person, and you're putting yourself down. 1 Samuel 17:37 says, David said, the Lord has saved me from lions and bears. He'll save me from this Philistine. All right. Saul answered, go, and the Lord be with you. So here we just drop into this story right in the middle of the familiar Bible story, David and Goliath. Just track with me for a minute. I know I'm going everywhere. Just hang on. We step into this scene of this giant Philistine. He's threatening the armies of Israel. Goliath had spent 40 days taunting, strutting back and forth in the face of the Israelites, mocking, hurling insults, blaspheming God. And none of those Israeli soldiers wanted to fight him. Not a one. Not a one. In fact, they weren't just sitting idly by waiting for someone to step up. They ran and hid. They tucked tail and they were hiding. And then along comes this peached, fuzzed face little boy, David. Some shepherd kid. And he says, I'll fight him. I'll fight him. And dismissing him immediately, the soldiers are like, boy, there's no way. You're out of your mind. Do you understand what you're saying right now? Who do you think you are? And David persists, and he finally makes his way to King Saul. He makes his way through the ranks, and he gets to the king. And he says, what? I can do this. I can do this. When the lions attacked, the Lord was with me, and he helped me kill them. When the bears attacked, the Lord was with me, and he helped me kill them. I mean, who's this Philistine? The Lord will help me kill him too, right? And so finally, Saul says, okay, God be with you, right? Interesting, right? Interesting how all the ones that we would assume when reading this Bible story would be the heroes of the story, the big Israelite army, soldiers, they're trained for it. They were nowhere to be found. The one that is absolutely against all odds, no way, no how, not equipped, he's the one who becomes the star of the story. That right there should speak volumes to all of our insecurities. All the things that disqualify us should be settled in this story right here. But of course they're not. So let's keep reading. 1 Samuel 17:38-39. It says, then Saul outfitted David as a soldier in armor. He put on his bronze helmet on his head. He belted his sword on him over the armor. David tried to walk, but he just could hardly budge. And David told Saul, I can't even move with all this stuff on me. I'm not used to this. And he took it all off. David was not a big old soldier. He wasn't used to hauling around this crazy heavy armor. He wasn't used to wielding the sword everywhere. He just couldn't do it. There was not an anointing on David to be a soldier in Saul's armor. Understand what I'm saying when I say this. You are not anointed to do what someone else does. And that is beautifully okay. That is totally great. It's totally great. We read that story sometimes so quickly, and we think that David was this burly, big soldier. He wasn't. He was probably 14. He's probably like some junior high kid. That armor didn't fit him. Imagine a little boy putting his dad's clothes on, but pretend it's like a knight's armor. Like he can't walk in it. How in the world is he supposed to fight some enemy? He couldn't do it, and he just said, I can't. Yes. He didn't want to struggle under it, so he just took it off. How many of you are weighed down right now under someone else's armor, someone else's expectations? Someone has told you somewhere along the way that you have to do it. Oh, you can do it. God be with you as long as you do it the way I do it, or as long as you do it the way I've always done it, or the way I expect you to do it, and you can't move. Take it off. Just take it off. So 1 Samuel 17:40 goes on and it says, so David took his shepherd's staff and he selected 5 smooth stones from the brook. and he put them in this pocket of his shepherd's pack, like a fanny pack, right? He sticks in his little fanny pack, and he takes his sling in his hand, and he approaches Goliath. This giant, freakishly huge man. The Bible says he had 6 hands, 6 fingers, 6 toes. He's huge. He's just ginormous. This little kid. And the story goes on to describe how David, against all natural odds, killed a giant of a man on the very first swing of his slingshot. He didn't wear armor. He didn't have a helmet on. He didn't use a sword. All he had were 5 little stones, just 5 dumb rocks and a slingshot. And the Lord. And the Lord. You see, it doesn't matter what you have or what you don't have. David could have sat there comparing himself to all these other big soldiers, and he could have disqualified himself from the get-go. He could have kept Saul's armor on and said, you know what, this is what's expected of me. I've got to do it like this. He didn't. He took it off. You know what would have happened had he done what everyone expected? He would not have killed Goliath. Goliath would have killed him. And not just him, the entire Israeli army would have been obliterated. And this is just the beginning of the story. David's triumph propelled him into greatness. It eventually led him to becoming king. David, a little nobody. The one everybody looked past, the one who didn't have the right body type, the right gifts, the right personality. This little tiny boy who sat out in a field somewhere singing to sheep, playing a ukulele or a flute somewhere. He had no business stepping up on a foreign enemy army. Who in the world did he think he was? I don't know. Maybe David just happened to simply believe that he was perfectly made to be beautifully himself. He wasn't caught up in comparison or competition. I think the biggest giant that David faced that day wasn't Goliath. I think it was the giant of comparison. In the presence of all of those grown soldiers, in the presence of a king. Imagine that. We read through this so fast, but he was standing in front of the king. The king. And he was like, dude, I can't do this with your stuff on me. It's got to go. He just knew that he could confidently and securely pick up what he knew best, what his hands had been made for. What his hands had been made for, he went and picked up those stones. He shut out all the voices, and he knew exactly who God had made him to be. It wasn't laborious. It wasn't burdensome. It wasn't forced. Was it scary? You better believe it was scary. But it wasn't forced. It was effortless. It was effortless, like unforced rhythms of grace. That's what happens when we function in our God-given design. So how can you avoid falling victim to the comparison trap? Let's write it down. Number 1, put blinders on. Just like a racehorse wears blinders so it doesn't run off course or go into another horse's lane or try to keep up with another horse's pace, it keeps blinders on. We're to keep blinders on so that we stay on our course, in our lane, with our pace. Did you know that this generation has been bombarded more than any other generation with the temptation to compare? How? Well, most of you are on it right now. You hold in your hand a phone with Instagram on it. You fall into the trap of comparison 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We're reminded all day long, every day, that we don't have a marriage that looks like an engagement photo session, that our kids aren't as well behaved or dressed as nice as I am right now. In fact, the kids we see on Instagram, they are wearing clothes that I can't afford, right? They bombard us all the time. And we fall into this trap of feeling like we just aren't doing enough. We aren't being enough. Everyone else is doing something better. I'm going to free you from something right now that many of you have literally felt imprisoned by. Are you ready? It's profound. You are allowed to unfollow anyone who leads you down a path of feeling insecure, anxious, stressed, not enough, less than, and don't apologize for it. I know you're scared to do that because in this world we've been told that, oh, I guess we're not friends. Really? That's what being a friend is? By who you let come in on your phone? What are we doing, you guys? This world is not even real. It's not real. And if you're too scared to unfollow because you're scared someone has an app and they're going to find out and it's going to cause waves, hit mute. And if you don't know how to do that, ask your kid. They'll tell you. It's been said, I will not allow anyone to walk through my mind with their dirty feet. I make this decision often, and I don't apologize for it. It is my choice. It is my choice. It is up to me what I allow into my mind and into my heart. And if I don't want to follow people because I get stressed, then I just turn it off. Stop being imprisoned by social media. It is not a real world, y'all. It's not real. We forget, oh, I put selfies on all the time. You know why? Because from here up, I got makeup on, my hair's done. But from here down, I'm all in sweats and jammies. Like, no one sees all that. No one knows that the corner around the picture, my house is a wreck. It's not real. It's photoshopped. It's fake. People know the right angles. They know the right filters. I'm sorry, but filters are everywhere. Why can't we just put pictures up of just ourselves? Right? Oh, because no one would like our pictures. We'd have to buy likes. David never apologized when he couldn't move under Saul's armor. He never felt bad that he wasn't anyone but himself. Never. He didn't succumb to the trap of comparison. He didn't play into the game of competition. He didn't have to. Why? Because he was secure in who God made him to be. He didn't scroll through all these people's feeds that he didn't even like. Social media is awful because we can, in real time, see all the fun everybody's having when we know full well they're at home doing nothing. And they post old pictures up of them and their spouse being so sweet when we know full well their spouse is sleeping on the couch and they're trying to make a fake life. It's not real. Number 2, write it down. Celebrate your strengths. Am I saying to boast in yourself? No, I am not saying that. David never arrogantly walked around strutting, boasting in his own strengths, but he did say from the start, hey, it's the Lord that killed the lion. Hey, it's the Lord that killed the bear. Hey, it's the Lord that can help me kill the Philistine. He knew where his strengths lie. He knew. Not one misstep was made when God created you. Not one. He didn't get it wrong. He chose your shape. He chose your complexion. He chose your hair texture. He chose your personality. He chose if you were going to be out, loud, crazy, walk in a room, start a party. And thank God for you guys, because you make the Kims of the world feel like, man, I just got invited to the party of parties. And he also created the ones that are shy and quiet and steadfast and even-keeled when their husbands want to quit and they're like, don't quit. The ones that serve in the backgrounds. Don't apologize for the personality God strategically and purposely gave you. Celebrate your strengths. Number 3, write it down. Remain in grace. Remain in grace. I want you to look at the story of David and Goliath in a whole different way. I know we read through these stories in the Old Testament, and it's easy for us to put ourselves in a place in these stories. We try to fit, like, where do I fit in this story? There are a lot of principles that apply to our lives for sure, but for a moment, I want you to take a look at this story from just a different perspective for a moment. I love the Old Testament. I love it because it is a picture of pictures of many pictures that all point to Jesus, shadows and types and images woven all through the Old Testament. So I want you to look at this story the way that it was intended to reveal Christ to us. David in the story is a picture of Christ. Goliath, he is the enemy. So where does that leave us? Who are we in this story? Well, we're the Israelite army. We're those soldiers. We're the ones who for 40 days we were taunted by the enemy. There was nothing that we could do in our own strength to defeat him. So what do? We hid away. Along comes this nobody, this man after God's own heart, who does for us what we could not do for ourselves. Do you see the similarities between David and Jesus? He didn't compare himself to anyone else. In fact, the Bible said that there was nothing about Jesus that you would even desire. Jesus wasn't burdened by the religious expectations of the Pharisees, just like David wasn't burdened by the expectations of Saul or the soldiers or the enemy, for that matter. Remember those 5 little insignificant stones? In the Bible, 5 represents, the number 5, it represents grace towards humanity. David picked up those 5 stones, and when he did, he picked up grace. He picked up grace and he turned straight around and he proceeded to kill the enemy. And interestingly, it didn't even require 5 stones. He killed in one shot. One shot, the enemy was defeated. In one shot, once did Jesus go to the cross. Once. That's it. One time. So why 5 stones? Why 5 stones? The 5 stones, it's grace upon grace, upon grace, upon grace, upon grace that empowers us to live a full, abundant, rich, satisfying, victorious life. It's overkill. It's overkill. You know what's crazy? As soon as David killed Goliath, the Israeli army charged and defeated the rest of the ranks. And then they returned and took the spoils. How? Because the enemy had already been defeated. They weren't fighting in defense. They were on the offense. They were fighting from a place of victory. Because Goliath had been killed, they already had the victory. The enemy was defeated, so they just went for it. They just went full out. David only needed that one stone to kill Goliath. That enemy who tempts us to sneak away into self-sufficiency and self-effort, the enemy who tries to convince us that we need to add just a little something extra by our good works, by our own good works to what Jesus completely already fulfilled. We were rescued by grace, and now we are to remain in grace. Grace fulfilled every deficiency that we could ever possibly have. And actually now it overflows. Those 4 extra stones, that's overflow. It's just overflow. So I want to quickly fast forward now. After David killed Goliath, right? Word spreads fast around all the people. And so the people start celebrating. They start singing. Maybe you're familiar with this passage, and it says, people start singing this song. Saul has killed his thousands, but David has killed his 10,000s. Saul has killed his thousands, but David his 10,000s. So what happens? Saul gets really jealous with that one little line. All of a sudden, King Saul is shown up by this kid, and people are singing about it. All of a sudden, Saul starts comparing. He falls victim to the trap of comparison. What does he do? He goes after David. It gets so bad that eventually he goes after him to the point of wanting to kill him. So David's on the run. He's forced to go on the run because of Saul's massive insecurities. We find David hiding in caves for his life. He's running for his life. So David comes across the house of God. 1 Samuel 21, 8-11, and it says, so David asked the priest, do you have a spear or a sword of any kind around here? I didn't have a chance to grab my weapons. Like, the man's on the run. And the priest says, I mean, I have got the sword of Goliath, the Philistine that you killed at Oak Valley. That's here. It's behind this ephod wrapped in a cloth. If you want it, take it, but there's nothing else here. And David says, there's no sword like it. Give it to me. David just happens to go to the house of God. And he just so happens to ask the priest for a weapon. And the priest just so happens to say, I just so happen to have. David just happens to stumble upon Goliath's sword. So he walks over behind the ephod. And what does he find? Goliath's sword. The enemy's sword. The very enemy who David killed. Can you imagine for just a moment how that must have felt to David? He is on the run, running from a different enemy, running for his very life, hiding in dark, damp caves. It looks like his life is over. And the priest says, here, take this sword. It was your enemy's sword. Take it. David wraps his hand around that sword. Why? To use it? To use it to kill this new enemy? No. David not once used his sword against Saul. He didn't need to. This sword was just simply a picture of grace. It was a trophy of grace. Can you imagine wrapping his hand around this? How it must have felt in his hand? He was reminded that God saved his life once before. It reminded him that he was going to be king. There was a promise, and yet he was running for his life, and that promise was not even fulfilled yet. Can you imagine how many of us have gone through life, and we've been promised something, and we've been waiting and waiting and waiting, and we're hiding out in caves, and it feels like a tomb. It feels like death. And all of a sudden the Lord says, I've got a trophy of grace. The very sword of your enemy that you defeated, I've got it for you. Just wrap your hand around it. Just wrap your hand around it and hold it up. Just remember, you don't have to use it. You don't have to fight. Just use it. It's just a trophy. It's just a reminder. You don't have to struggle and battle and fight because the battle's already won. It's already won. Now just rest. Just rest. Can you imagine those nights when literally he laid in that dark cave like Jesus in a tomb, being reminded that, David, you will be king. You will. Just wait. And he reached over and he would tap that sword. He'd just tap it. And he'd remember, that was my enemy's sword. And he's dead and long gone. Y'all, how many of you are sitting right here? You've outlasted your enemy. That sickness that you were told was going to take you out, that abusive relationship that you thought was going to take you out, that unhealthy relationship that you thought would be the death of you, that financial situation you thought, there's no way I am going to get through this, and yet you're still here. And right now, God is saying, you know what? Just put your hands up. Just feel that sword in your hand. Just feel it. Just feel it. Come on, feel it. Move it around. Move it around. Feel it in your hand. It's a trophy of grace. You've outlasted your enemy. And he says, I'm going to fight your battles. You just rest, and you will come out of that grave. You will come out of that tomb. You will come out of that cave as a king, because I've anointed you as king. You may not see it yet, but I've anointed you as king. Just wait. Just hold on. I'm not done with you. It's not over yet. You've got a trophy of grace right there in your hand. Don't forget it. I love how the Lord uses the most ironic situations. It could have been anyone's sword. Could have been anyone's sword. But it was Goliath's sword. I want want you to say today's confession with me. I want you to remind yourself that it's not you who fight battles. It's not you who are expected to measure up. It's not you, but it's Christ who lives in you, the one who defeated your enemy. He lives in and through you today. I want you to say this with me. Put your hands up. Feel that sword in your hand again. Feel it in your hand. This is what empowers you. I have been empowered by Jesus to be beautifully me, because he dispenses his life into mine. That's good news today. That's good news.
Come on and give Jesus a good hand clap.